In this video, I'm going to be sharpening the blade for this plane. I have not sharpened it before. I use it straight from the package after I bought it, and like I say, I never sharpened it. So it's a factory edge here on this blade, which wasn't that dull actually. It was pretty sharp right out of the box. Not too bad anyway. But there's a couple other things I want to do with it too. There's a problem with the adjuster here back and forth. It looks like it bent at some point. I don't know if I did that myself, dropped it or whatever. But just fix that, because that's what skews the blade, you know, back and forth. And it was actually catching up in the slot here on the blade. And also, the chip breaker doesn't make good contact with the blade the way it should, because I'm getting chips inside there collecting. So I'm going to fix that as well. All right, first up I'm going to take the chip breaker thing off. Loosen that screw, and wow, there's a lot of junk in there. And the problem with these is they're not very substantial to begin with. And in order for the to stop the chips from getting in, it has to make really good contact with the back of the blade there. So I'm just going to grind that down a little bit here on the sharpening stone to see if I can get that nice and flat. All right, that looks a lot better there. Certainly a lot smoother. I'm just going to take it and flip it over and remove the burr from the other side. Although this is not a cutting edge, the tighter the interface between it and the plane blade below, the less chance there is of chips getting underneath it. So it's a little bit of a tune-up here. Okay, that's a huge improvement right there. There's absolutely no gap, no way for chips to get in, which is the way it should be. Let's set that aside. Now I want to sharpen the blade itself. I've got my chisel and plain iron sharpening jig here, and I've set it up kind of. To set it up, I've got this piece that's 3/4 of an inch high to set it down on. I've got the angle set to 25 degrees, which matches the bevel that's on this, the primary bevel. And I'm going to slide the plain blade into the holder until it sits down evenly on the stone, and then I can tighten up the clamping bar. Okay, that looks really close. What that does is it indexes the blade itself to the surface of the stone and not so much to the jig. That way you don't have to do too many adjustments. But to fine tune it, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my black marker and I'm going to color the primary bevel, and that'll show me exactly where the stone is cutting when I sharpen with it. Now looking at this, I can see that it's very even across. So I'm just going to wipe off the marker and have a better look. And if anything, this blade has a little bit of a bulge in the middle that might have to be worked on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work down the primary bevel a little bit on the fine side here. I'm not going to switch to the coarse side at all during the sharpening. And what that'll do is it'll smooth out that primary bevel, which is kind of rough actually, and make it ready for me to put the secondary bevel on, or the micro bevel, I guess you could call it. Now that looks really good. Nice and even and clean right across. Perfect. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to change the angle. I'm going to tilt it up slightly. Not much, by maybe 2 or 3 degrees. I've got marks right here on my jig that tell me where I need to put it. Let's tip it up and then I'll retighten the wing nuts. See how easy this is? And it gives you, and what it does for you, it gives you a perfectly straight blade right across. This is something that I think is not as appreciated as it should be, to have a nice straight grind right across your chisel. And it's something you simply can't get when you're doing it by hand. Now some would argue that you don't need to have it, so why not sharpen it by hand? But I don't know. I like having that nice and straight across there and perfectly square to the blade. So exactly the same thing again. I'm gonna get some oil on my stone here. This is just regular motor oil that I thin down a little bit with the mineral spirits and wipe it into the stone. Spread it around. And now I can, and this will not take long at all, just a few swipes. All I'm looking for is a burr, a nice even burr on the back side. Now when I look at this blade, I can see I've got a very tiny nick in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go a little bit further to try to get rid of that. Okay, that looks like it. I can't see the nick anymore, so that's a good thing. I'll take it out of the jig. And I've got one more step to do, and that's to get rid of that burr that's on the back. I'm just going to wipe it off a little bit first. Then get a little bit more oil on my stone. Not much, because this doesn't take a lot either. I'm just going to lay the blade flat on the stone like this and push it ahead to get rid of that burr. Okay, that looks awesome to me. Awesome enough. Anyway, I think that this, the fine side of this stone is 600 grit, and I don't see the need for making it any finer than that. I haven't noticed the difference anyway. I've got a much finer diamond plate behind me, but I find that to be basically a waste of time. You take it up to this, and you're good to go as far as I'm concerned with this hand plane anyway. It's good to check to make sure you're still square after you're sharpening. And I got my combination square on it here, and it looks absolutely perfect. So I can put it back in the plane. Not that it being absolutely perfectly square is that super important, but it's good to keep it that way when you're sharpening it. That way it doesn't get, you know, completely lopsided, and then you've got to do a whole bunch of work down the road to try to correct it. That would be my problem with it anyway. I've got the blade put back in, and it looks good. I haven't tried it yet. I just checked the adjuster here, and it works fine now. As you can see, it's back and forth. This part is so flimsy, so thin, and it'd be better if it was hardened steel. That way you couldn't, you know, bend it over like a wet noodle. So I'm just going to put that in the center, and I've got a piece of oak, white oak, here in my vise to try it out on. I'm just going to start off with nothing and work up to the point where it's actually giving me shavings, hopefully. We'll get there. We will. We'll get there. It's going to happen any day now. Ah, here we go. A little bit more. All right, looking good. Oh yeah, nice curly shavings. Everybody loves the nice, thin, curly shavings. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and if you're interested in the jig, it's available on my website. Plans are there if you want to make one of your own, which I highly recommend, because getting these results is hard to beat.